So here's the deal. Something pretty big and not so great happened recently with my husband, and it's got me feeling all sorts of bad. Like, I'm hurt, super embarrassed, and just plain confused. It's like there's this heavy backpack of feelings I've been carrying around, and I haven't even been able to talk to anyone about it. Let me paint you a picture real quick. My husband, Ken, is a bit older than me, 7 years to be exact. We first crossed paths when I was just 21, and to be honest, I was not in a good place at all. Back then, I had just gotten out of this really rough relationship. My ex, not a good guy. He was the kind of person who would try to control everything and made me feel pretty awful. So when Ken walked into my life, it was like someone turned on the lights after a really long blackout. He seemed like the dream guy, basically the total opposite of my ex. Ken was the type to plan out all our dates, really listened when I talked, and seemed to have his life figured out. Plus, he was straight up about what he wanted right from the start. He was on the lookout for someone he could see himself marrying one day. At first, the whole "he's older than me" thing had me wondering if I should keep seeing Ken, especially because the whole marriage topic was a bit of a question mark for me. But as time went on and we kept hanging out, I found myself falling for him more and more. Here's a bit of sad background. Ken doesn't have his parents anymore because they died in a car crash when he was really young. I think that's a huge reason why he's always dreamed of having his own family someday. So as things between us started to get more serious, I decided it was time for him to meet my family. And guess what? They totally loved him. Ken's got this charm and confidence that just clicks with people. And my dad seemed to like him right off the bat. Even my oldest sister, Jamie, who's usually pretty tough to impress, didn't have a single bad thing to say about him. Actually, I remember Jamie telling me once that Ken was a real catch. Since Jamie was single at the time, I would often invite her along when Ken and I went out. So, there I was, in this pretty awesome setup where my sister Jamie, my boyfriend Ken, and I were like this super tight trio. It was the kind of dynamic where you're just grateful because everyone gets along like a house on fire. Honestly, it warmed my heart to see my boyfriend and my sister being pals, laughing and sharing stories. It was clear as day that they were just friends, and I loved that harmony we had going on. Eventually, Jamie's love life took a turn for the better, and she started dating Fred, this guy who was as laid back as they come, with a strong belief in the power of crystals and the stars guiding us in life. Now, this might sound a bit out there for some, but for Jamie and Fred, it was their common ground, something special that brought them closer. Now imagine this. Our get-togethers evolved into double dates. It was a new chapter for us, hanging out not just as siblings and friends, but as couples. Though Ken and Fred weren't destined to be the best of buds, they managed to coexist peacefully enough. Our gatherings were filled with laughter, shared meals, and the occasional debate over movie choices. It was nice, really, a kind of friendship and kinship blended into one. But then, there were these moments, these tiny fractures in the smooth surface of our group dynamic that began to show. Ken, bless his heart, just couldn't wrap his head around Fred's worldview. Fred was all about living life guided by what the stars said and finding answers in the energy of crystals. A pretty harmless way to live if you ask me, and it made him and Jamie click on a level that was beautiful to witness. They had this vibe, a connection over their shared beliefs that was genuinely sweet. However, Ken, ever the pragmatic one, found the whole concept baffling, to say the least. There were times after our group hangouts when Ken would unleash his thoughts, unable to hide his skepticism. He would get all worked up, questioning how someone as smart and grounded as Jamie could fall for someone he saw as, let's just say, not on the same intellectual plane. Ken didn't mince words when he shared his opinions with me, calling Fred things like a lunatic or a weirdo, which honestly was tough to hear. He couldn't see what Jamie saw in Fred, couldn't understand the bond they shared over their beliefs in astrology and the mystical. It was a point of contention, a thorn in the side of what was otherwise a smooth-running machine of friendship and familial bonds. So I mostly tried to keep the peace, I figured everyone's got their quirks and maybe Ken would eventually see Fred's good points. But then, this one dinner happened, and let me tell you, it was a doozy. We all used to go out for meals together, nothing too fancy, just good food and good company. And we had this thing where we'd take turns covering the bill, which was pretty cool because it kept things fair and easy. This time around, it was Fred's turn to pay. But plot twist, he ended up being short on cash right then. So he asked Jamie if she could cover it, promising he'd pay her back. Now, in my book, that's no big deal, right? Stuff happens. But Ken, oh man, he did not take it well. In front of everyone, he starts going off about how a real man would never let his partner pay for dinner, and hinted that he, unlike Fred, would always take care of Jamie because, she was like a sister to him, given that he was with me and all. We all just froze. You could have heard a pin drop. I looked at Ken like he'd grown another head. What was he even saying? Trying to dial it back, Ken stumbled over his words, trying to explain he meant it in a brotherly, family-type way, since Jamie was practically family to him through me. I didn't say anything right then because honestly, what do you even say to that without causing a scene right there in the restaurant? So I just shook my head, keeping my thoughts to myself, not wanting to turn dinner into an even more awkward mess. After that awkward dinner, I couldn't just let it go. So I decided it was time for a serious chat with Ken. I wanted to understand why he said what he did and let him know it wasn't okay. When we finally talked, Ken was all about how he's gotten super close to my family and how he sees them as his own. He kept saying that Fred needed to step up his game. I wasn't having any of it, though. I made it clear to Ken that it wasn't his place to comment on Jamie's relationship with Fred. I told him straight up, "Stay out of it. You can't talk to my sister's boyfriend like that, and I'm not just going to ignore it when you do." Ken took the hint after that conversation. From what I saw, he didn't cause any more drama. He managed to keep quiet about Fred and even maintained a solid relationship with my parents, just like he always had. That's why when he popped the question, despite the nerves and the butterflies making a storm in my stomach, I said yes. Deep down, I believed Ken was the one for me. Our wedding was nothing short of magical. Ken went all out, making sure it was the dream wedding I'd always hoped for. It was grand, beautiful, and showed just how much he cared. Ken really stepped up for our wedding, covering most of the expenses, even though my parents chipped in a bit too. Everyone around me, my friends, my cousins, they all couldn't stop talking about how lucky I was to marry an older guy who had his life together. Planning the wedding was a whole adventure, with my mom and Jamie jumping in to make sure everything was just perfect. The wedding itself was like something out of a dream, and after all the excitement, Ken and I jetted off to Hawaii for our honeymoon. Hawaii had always been at the top of my wish list, and let me tell you, it did not disappoint. We had the best time soaking up the sun, the love, everything. It was like we were in our own little perfect bubble, where everything was right in the world. But as it goes, reality waited for us back home. I was settling back into my routine, working from my home office as a graphic designer. It's a job I love mainly because I can work with clients from all over the world right from my own space. Then, this one day, I'm deep in my work when I hear a knock at the door. Thinking it's probably just a package I'd been waiting for, I opened the door without a second thought. But there, instead of a delivery person, was a pregnant woman I'd never seen before. She was looking for Ken. I was a bit taken aback, not sure what to make of it. But I offered to take a message, thinking maybe she got the address wrong or something. There was this pause, a moment where she seemed to be wrestling with what to say next, biting her lip in nervous hesitation. Hearing her ask to come in, caught between surprise and concern, I hesitated. But seeing her there, visibly pregnant and upset, my heart just couldn't turn her away. So I invited her inside, trying to be as kind as possible under the circumstances. I handed her a glass of water, hoping it might offer some small comfort. Once she seemed a bit more settled, she looked at me with this heavy sort of question in her eyes and asked if I was Ken's wife. When I confirmed it, it was like I could physically feel the atmosphere in the room change. She then shared something that rocked me to my core. She explained that she had been with Ken 4 months ago, a revelation that made my stomach turn. The idea that my husband, the man I had just married and dreamed of building a future with, could do something like this was unimaginable. She continued, tearfully revealing that she was pregnant and at a loss. She didn't want the baby, she said, struggling with the decision of whether or not to get an abortion, a choice she felt too overwhelmed to face alone. She explained how she had managed to find Ken by tracing him back to our home from his LinkedIn profile, having followed him the previous day. She had intended to confront him directly, but hadn't found the courage until today, a Saturday, when she hoped he'd be home. As she shared her story, I was in shock, my mind racing with confusion, hurt, and disbelief. The fact that she had chosen today to come, thinking Ken would be here, only to find me, added another layer of complication to an already painful situation. And there I was, facing a woman connected to my husband in a way I never could have anticipated, trying to navigate an emotional minefield without any clear sense of what to do next. Opening the door to her, not knowing who she was or what she would say, led to a revelation that turned my world upside down. It was as if the ground beneath me vanished. The man I had built my life with, the person I had dedicated myself to, had betrayed our vows. In a whirlwind of emotions, I found myself running to the bathroom, trying desperately to find some footing in a reality that suddenly seemed so alien. How could Ken, the man I believed was the embodiment of kindness and commitment, shatter our life together in such a way. Throughout our relationship, I had been the rock. I stood by him, believing in us, in him. To discover his infidelity felt like being blindsided by a betrayal I never saw coming. Panic took hold, my breaths coming in short, rapid bursts as I tried to wrap my mind around the news. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare with no way to wake up. Meanwhile, the woman, still in my living room, was a mirror of distress, her tears a reminder of the pain we were both experiencing. Despite the chaos swirling inside me, I couldn't ignore her suffering. It was a moment of shared anguish between two strangers thrown together by circumstance. I reached out to Ken, my voice barely steady, demanding he come home immediately. There was something in my tone, maybe the tremor of shock, that prompted him to leave work without question and rush back. The moment Ken walked through the way door and saw us together, the air thick with tension and unspoken accusations, I knew. The look on his face confirmed my worst fears before he even said a word. His expression, the way the color drained from his face, spoke volumes. It was a silent admission of guilt, a visual confirmation that the woman's words were true. My husband had cheated, and in that instant, the foundation of our marriage crumbled. The situation unraveled like a tragic story, one I never imagined being a part of. There I was, confronting the reality that the man I considered my partner for life had been unfaithful, leading to a consequence that was impossible to ignore. As Ken kneeled before me, his eyes filled with regret, he tried to frame his betrayal as a mistake, an error he deeply regretted. But the words did little to comfort me. Each explanation, each excuse, felt like another twist of the knife in an already gaping wound. How could a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment, result in such devastation? Ken's attempt to justify his actions by citing stress from our wedding planning only added to my pain. The revelation that a chance encounter in a bar had led to this moment of reckoning was almost too much to bear. The woman, sitting there, confirming their fleeting connection, only intensified the surreal nature of the conversation. It was a night that should have meant nothing, yet it altered everything. My mind raced as I considered the magnitude of Ken's mistake. This wasn't just a simple error that could be mended with apologies. The presence of this woman, pregnant with his child, no, children, as she revealed the shocking news of twins, was a tangible, permanent reminder of his infidelity. It was a situation that left me wishing our vows had never been spoken, as my dream of a life together shattered into pieces. Ken's reaction to the news of the twins, questioning the paternity out of desperation or perhaps denial, only served to deepen the chasm between us. It was a moment filled with so much heartache, so much disappointment. The realization that our relationship, built on trust and love, was now in ruins was overwhelming. The future, once so bright and promising, seemed irreparably darkened by a single night's mistake. The woman's willingness to undergo a paternity test brought a glimmer of reality into a situation that felt overwhelmingly surreal. Her declaration that she sought neither the children nor any support from Ken, only to inform him of their existence before making a decision about their future, was a moment of stark clarity amid the chaos. Her departure left a silence that was both a relief and a burden, a pause in the storm that allowed the weight of her words to truly sink in. In the days that followed, Ken was relentless in his appeals for forgiveness. He tried to paint the woman as a meaningless encounter, a mistake born from a moment of weakness. His promises that such a betrayal would never occur again were meant to offer reassurance, but each justification seemed to echo hollowly, unable to pierce the fog of betrayal and hurt that enveloped me. I found myself trapped in a state of limbo, oscillating between the desire to leave and the fear of succumbing to an even deeper despair. The sanctuary of my bed became both a comfort and a prison, as I grappled with the enormity of the decision before me. The memories of our life together, once filled with love and hope, now seemed tainted, irreversibly altered by Ken's actions. The image of Ken's devastation at the woman's decision to put the twins up for adoption lingered with me. It was a moment that underscored the irreversible consequences of his actions, a reminder of the innocent lives caught in the wake of our personal tragedy. The path forward was unclear, obscured by pain, betrayal, and the daunting prospect of navigating a future forever changed by a single, irrevocable mistake. The confirmation of Ken's paternity was a crushing blow, extinguishing the faint glimmer of hope that had been lingering in the back of my mind. The reality that Ken was indeed the father of the twins made the betrayal even more palpable, the pain more acute. When Ken sat me down to discuss the future, his words felt like they were coming from a stranger. The idea that he viewed this situation as a blessing, and his suggestion that we should consider adopting the babies, was beyond my comprehension. My anger and disbelief boiled over as I listened to him, incredulous that he could suggest such a thing under the circumstances. Ken's attempts to justify his proposal, to frame it as an opportunity for us to start the family we had always talked about, only added fuel to the fire of my emotions. His argument that this could be a way for us to bypass the challenges of pregnancy seemed disconnected from the emotional turmoil and betrayal that lay at the heart of our situation. The mention of his own difficult past, losing his parents and growing up in an orphanage, was a painful reminder of his longing for a family. However, it did little to bridge the gap between us or to soothe the sense of betrayal that dominated my feelings. His perspective, while shaped by his own experiences and desires, failed to acknowledge the depth of hurt and breach of trust his actions had caused. The prospect of adopting the twins, in his view, was a chance to fulfill a shared dream of parenthood. But for me, it was a stark reminder of the infidelity that had shattered our marriage. The idea of turning this situation into a solution for our future family plans seemed to me a denial of the complex, painful emotions and the healing that needed to occur before we could even begin to consider the path forward. The chasm between us, widened by betrayal and conflicting emotions, seemed insurmountable, leaving me to wrestle with the uncertainty of what the future might hold for us, both individually and together. I knew that this was a dark phase in his life, and he did go to several foster homes which scarred him even further. Ken broke down in tears and begged me to think about this in a core mind and reconsider my decision. I asked him about what would we even tell my parents, since his cheating incident was embarrassing enough, and I could not let my family find out that I was not going to raise his affair. Kids. Ken winced at the words, and told me how I knew that the woman meant nothing to him, and that when it came to the children, I had nothing to worry about, since we could always say that they were adopted. I started to laugh and pointed out how that might be difficult since the kids might start to look like him. But Ken told me that we would cross that road when we had to. He assured me that he would take care of me and the kids, and we would be one big, happy family. Ken is a really smooth talker, and for the next few days, I did catch myself mulling over his idea. It was true that the woman in Ken had no emotional connection, and she seemed like a nice person since she had been quite truthful to me. She definitely had no intentions about keeping the children, and it didn't make me sad thinking about the twins going into the system. If I didn't leave Ken and decided to stay with him, I don't know if Ken could ever recover from that situation knowing his children were growing up in strangers' homes. If I did decide to leave Ken, I would have to come clean about his cheating, and this would just hurt my parents as much as it had hurt me. Besides the cheating, Ken was a good husband to me, and I didn't want our marriage to end so quickly. I didn't know if I could forgive him completely, but I decided that if we did decide to adopt the twins, we needed to go about this the legal way. When I informed Ken about this, he was beside himself in joy. He assured me that he would contact the lawyer and ensure that we would have proper documentation of the woman giving up the child to ask for full custody. We also needed to discuss how we could adopt them. I won't get into the details, but this was a long, strenuous process. Throughout all this, I never once told my parents or Jamie anything, and no one was the wiser. The pregnant woman was more than helpful to us, and had no issues signing all the papers we needed to adopt her babies. She was happy that she was leaving her kids with us, since she also felt bad about giving them up for adoption. When she went into labor, Ken and I were really stressed since hers was a high-risk pregnancy, but thankfully nothing happened. She and the twins were both okay when I held the twins for the first time. I felt like all the hardships I had faced until then was somewhat worse. I didn't even know I was crying tears of joy while holding them until the nurse pointed it out to me. We brought the babies home, and since then I have found another purpose to live my life. The hardest thing at that point was breaking the news to my family, who had no idea about all of this. My parents were shocked and immediately rushed over to our place. Ken and I stuck to our plan and informed them that we had applied for adoption and had been selected to be the twins' parents. My mother started to cry as she checked on the babies, and my father was taken aback but did hug me while saying how he could not believe that his little girl had babies. Now, I got so emotional hearing that the rest of the family, including Jamie, did come and visit us, and they were all surprised with our decision but understood. No one doubted us, and I was glad since I didn't want to deal with explaining the truth to them. Besides, I had chosen to let go of Ken's mistakes, and I just wanted to move on with my babies. Trevor and Jack are the best boys I could have ever asked for. They are just adorable, and are what you would expect boys to be. They have red hair like their mother, which is probably why no one has ever suspected until now that they could be Ken's children. Ken is a doting father to them, but the boys love me more than their father since they are still children. It's been 4 years since we brought them home. Throughout all of this, a lot of things have changed between me and Ken. We have shifted to a much bigger place to accommodate the two boys. I've been promoted at my job, so I earn quite well for the first time in my career. We did go for couples counseling, and Ken has done everything in his power to be patient and loyal to me. My sister Jamie and her boyfriend Fred to tie the knot 2 years ago. Their wedding was fun, and we all had a great time. However, 3 months ago, we found out that Fred was leaving Jamie, which was quite a shock since they had been dating for a long time. Fred never disclosed to my parents any reason, but since he and I had a good rapport, he told me how he had found out that Jamie had been cheating on him with a coworker. This was a huge shock to me since I had no idea about this. I did try to talk to Jamie about it, but she told me that she didn't want to talk, so I let it go since I wanted to respect her space. Jamie had to move in with us since the house belonged to Fred's parents, who wanted her out immediately. Ken and I were more than accommodating to her. Jamie was also a good dad to our boys, so I was glad that she could live with us until she was ready to get back on her feet. Ken was always sweet to my sister as much as he was to me. If he brought me flowers, then he would buy her flowers. Also, if he brought me an expensive gift, he would buy her a surprise jewelry. It would hurt me. But my husband and I were doing well for ourselves, so I would let it slide. Besides, Jamie deserved to be pampered a bit since she had been feeling lonely after her divorce. However, I started to notice more and more about how close they were getting. Jamie would always touch his arms or laugh a bit loudly at his jokes. She would also comment to me how sexy she found that my husband took care of the children without bothering me. Last week, when I and my husband were sleeping, his phone vibrated because he got a text. Ken always has this bad habit of keeping his phone underneath his pillow, which means every time his phone vibrates, I can feel that as well. Call it a woman's intuition, but I felt something was definitely off. Ken was snoring, so I quietly took his phone into the bathroom. I knew his password, so I unlocked it to see that an unknown number has sent him a message saying, "I miss you." My heart dropped, and it felt like all my past fears came spiraling into my head. I felt like this was déjà vu and immediately woke him up. He sat up groggily asking me what had happened when I shocked the phone under his nose and asked him to explain himself. He stared at the phone for a second and told me that he had no idea who this was. He pointed out to me how this could have been sent to him by mistake, and since this number was not even saved on his phone, he calmed down as I was pacing around the room and told me how I was overthinking. He assured me that he would never do something like this and had learned from his mistakes the first time. I did feel a bit calm since his explanations did make sense, and there were no other messages exchanged between him and that number. I almost forgot about it until yesterday, when I walked into my house. I had gone out for groceries, but it was raining, so the store was closed. The twins were watching TV with the volume really up, which was almost deafening. I was about to lower the volume when I heard moaning from upstairs. I looked around and could not find my husband and Jamie around. I walked upstairs and realized that the sound was coming from our bedroom. I swung the door open to see Jamie doing the unspeakable with my husband. A small gasp escaped my mouth as I fell back to the ground in shock. Ken noticed me and went white as a sheet. He immediately put Jamie aside and looked like he had seen a ghost. Jamie, on the other hand, looked nonchalant until she quickly got dressed. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My own sister, my best friend, had betrayed me. The pain and anger surged through me like a tidal wave. I felt like my world was crumbling around me. How could they do this to me? How long has this been going on behind my back? I wanted to scream, to lash out at them, but I was paralyzed by shock and betrayal. Before I could even process what was happening, Jamie spoke, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Looks like Curtis's," she said, her tone mocking. "Guess you're not as smart as you thought." I started screaming abuse at her, telling her, how dare she come into my house and sleep with my husband with my kids downstairs? Jamie looked unfazed and replied back that she had done no wrong since she and Ken were in love with each other. Ken immediately started to shake his head and deny this, but Jamie told me how it was clear to her that I wasn't a good wife to him and that I did not appreciate him as much. So she had decided to take matters into her own hands and started to flirt with him. One thing led to another, and she slept with him twice. Both times when I was out with my boys doing some work. Only today I had gone alone and came back home earlier than expected. She said she saw an opportunity to take what she wanted, and she didn't hesitate to seize it. Can try to approach me. His face a mask of guilt and regrets, but I couldn't bear to look at him. The man I had worked so hard to trust again had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But I was more pissed at my sister and her justifications behind why she would sleep with my husband. I screamed at her that I could not bear to look at her face and that she needed to leave the house immediately. Otherwise, I would call the police on her. Jamie yelled back at me that it should be me who should leave this house, since this was technically Ken's house. She told me I had no right to tell her anything and that I needed to move out with my 2 kids. Ken started to protest, but I stopped him. I looked my sister straight in her eyes and told her, "Fine, but the kids stay." My sister looked at me confused, and this is when I revealed to her that these were technically my husband's kids since he had slept with another woman years back and got her pregnant. Of course, I would have never left my kids here, but I just needed an excuse to tell her the truth about Ken. She had clearly thought of him as this great man when he was nothing more than a coward and a cheater. The shock on her face was so evident that I could almost feel it as she turned to my husband, demanding explanations. He confirmed the truth of what I had just disclosed. I could feel some kind of satisfaction as I watched her process the truth. She asked my husband why he had not mentioned it before, and he replied that it was none of her business, and went on to clarify how, although he hooked up with her 3 times, including today, he didn't love her, nor did he want to pursue any kind of relationship with her. Jamie's eyes widened in shock, and she asked slowly what he meant by that. Ken went on to tell her that he didn't have any feelings for her whatsoever, and had made a huge mistake giving in to her. Jamie broke down. Ken asked her to leave the house so he could talk to me, and knew that having her around would distress me even more. With tears streaming down her face, she packed up and quickly left. I took my boys into their room as I didn't want them to sense that something was wrong. Ken later came into the room and asked me to talk to him. By then, my mind was already made up. I told him in the living room, away from the boys' earshot, that I was done with him. I asked him to pack up and leave since I could not leave with the boys. He started to plead and cry, but I was so done with his bullshit that I stopped him right there. I told him that he had done what he thought was right for him, and now I was going to do what was right for me. He tried to protest, but I stood my ground. In the end, he did leave with a suitcase full of his clothes. He told the boys that he was going on an urgent work trip, so they would not feel something was amiss. This all happened yesterday, and I have woken up today feeling broken. I feel really bad for the twins, who probably have no idea that their parents are going to split up. I grew up with parents who still love each other, and I don't want to subject my kids to the ugliness of divorce. I know it would be the right decision to leave Ken. Would I be an asshole to my kids for divorcing their dad? Update 1. First of all, thank you so much to everyone for your kind words. Since I wrote this post last week, I am shocked that a lot of you have reached out to me with similar stories, and this has given me the assurance I need that I am heading down the right path. The twins do ask about their dad sometimes since it has been a week, but then they get easily distracted with their toys. Ken texted me this week saying that he is living in a motel at the moment and sent me several long messages saying how my sister was to be blamed for all of this and how she seduced him. I have left him on read. I have no idea where Jamie is, and I honestly do not care. She has not contacted me once since leaving the house. Update 2. First thing I did this week was talk to my parents. I knew Jamie would never have the balls to tell them anything, so when I turned up at their place unannounced, they were surprised but happy to see me and the boys. When I finally told my parents about everything, they were shocked beyond words. I know a lot of you had written to me and that maybe my parents would not believe me, but in my case, my mother didn't even hesitate before hugging me as she and I broke down in grief. My dad was pissed and started to say how he could never forgive Jamie for doing this to me. Then I told my parents that I had even bigger news to tell them. My parents looked at me, worried as I confessed to them about how the twins were actually Ken's kids and were not adopted. My parents' expressions morphed from concern to disbelief as they grappled with this new revelation. They questioned me as I revealed to them about Ken's cheating incident with another woman and how we had adopted the children from her. My parents sat quietly for a moment, looking stunned. I told them that even though the twins were not biologically mine and a product of Ken's discrepancy, I no longer cared about it since I had officially adopted them and I was their mother. I loved them like my own since the first day I brought them back home. My parents assured me that they always have my back, and if I wanted to fight for custody for the children, they would be happy to help. My dad told me that he would help me find the best lawyer in our town so I could start preparing for my divorce. Update 3. Hi everyone. It has been 3 months since my last update. Many of you have reached out to me asking for an update on my situation. So here I am. I'm currently separated from my husband, and we are going through the divorce proceedings. Ken and I did talk to the twins about our divorce, and even though they didn't understand all of it, they were sad that we were all no longer going to live in one house. However, we tried to lighten the mood by highlighting the silver lining, the opportunity for double celebrations like Christmas and birthdays. As for Ken, He has offered apologies repeatedly for his betrayal of my sister. While I appreciate his remorse, I have chosen to take his words at face value without placing too much weight on them. For the sake of my children, I want to be polite and civil to him. My parents found out a few months ago that Jamie had been couch surfing with her friends, too ashamed and humiliated to reach out to anyone. However, when her friends no longer wanted her, she has no choice but to reach out to our parents, since she also had no job. My dad refused to let her in and let her know that she was no longer his daughter and that he was disgusted with her. I know my mom must be hurting to refuse my sister, but to her credit, she did support my dad. Jamie begged and groveled, but eventually had to leave. I have blocked her since a long time ago, so she has no way of contacting me, and if she ever comes to my property, I will straight away call the police on her.